All right, so we're going to do a short recap first before we start the group work that I assigned the people that came last week to do. So I'm going to start off with this lah. Okay, we were looking into Luke chapter 6. Okay, and we find that there were actually 8 parts altogether, but I split them into only 3 main sections. The first one is the conflict over the Sabbath. There were 2 conflicts. Okay, the first one had to do with the rubbing of the grain, and then the second one had to do with the third Sabbath miracle. Okay, so I asked you all to look into the third Sabbath miracle and to fill in the jadwal over there lah. Okay, that's the first one. Then secondly, we find that in the next section, we find that Jesus, it was the story of Jesus choosing the 12 apostles. Okay, and when we talk about the 12 apostles, we have to distinguish lah, okay, between the difference between apostles and disciples. Okay, so according to our notes, okay, there are 72 disciples, about 72 disciples. Disciples are people who learn under a certain teacher, but apostles are disciples that are chosen, and they're chosen for a very specific purpose. The word apostle means somebody who is sent. Okay, so it's sent to do something. Okay, sent to do the same thing that the teacher has done. So these apostles are 12 out of the 72. And we find that when Jesus was choosing the 12 apostles, he didn't just, who should I choose? Okay, any, mini, miny, mo. He didn't do that. Okay, we find that Jesus went, he separated himself. He went to a hill to pray. And Luke tells us that he prayed all night before coming to a decision about the 12 apostles. Okay, which is to remind us that in any major decision that we have to make, we should consult God. We should pray. We should pray, and we should not just pray one time and then expect that God will answer. Okay, and Jesus took the entire night to choose the 12. Okay, and I suppose it was not an easy decision. It was an easy decision because remember that one of the 12 that he had to choose was Judas Iscariot. Okay? Interestingly enough, Jesus had to choose somebody who was going to betray him. Obviously, Jesus knew that Judas Iscariot was going to betray him. Yet, Jesus chose him anyway. Okay, so sometimes I was thinking about this that day after our class. And I forgot to mention another thing besides, praying and so on. Sometimes we are very afraid of making the wrong decisions. Okay, we are afraid of making, and actually, if you think about it, the wrong decisions are decisions that will reflect badly on us. Or will have a negative impact on us. That's what we feel is a wrong decision. Okay, but even in making this decision, we find that God doesn't make mistakes. Okay, God never makes mistakes. He chose. Okay, God purposely chose one of the 12, and one of the 12. God purposely chose Judas Iscariot to be one of the 12, and one of the 12 is actually was going to betray him. So people can look at this and say, "Alamak, Jesus made a mistake. He shouldn't have chosen Judas Iscariot. Otherwise, he wouldn't die." But the point is this: Jesus had to die. Okay? God's will had to be done. So even in decisions that we think are wrong decisions, okay, actually they're not wrong decisions. They're just decisions that reflect badly on us. But even so, God still does good. Okay, God still does His will through those wrong decisions. So, I think we should not be afraid about making wrong decisions. Okay? Or we should not take too long to think, oh, did I make the wrong decision? But actually what we should be praying about is that whatever decision that we make, okay, let that decision be something that is part of God's will. Or let God work through that decision. Whether it is a good decision for you or a bad decision for you, okay, be confident that God still works. Okay? So don't be afraid. No, it doesn't mean that if you make a wrong decision, that means, that means God is going to leave you because you made the wrong decision. No, it doesn't. Okay, God still works through even the seemingly wrong decisions. Okay, and now we come to the third section in chapter 6, in which I broke everybody up into this thing called breakout rooms. Okay, we'll probably do that again today. Yay. Okay, and but we're going to talk about the Sermon on the Plain. Now, the Sermon on the Plain is a whole chunk of teachings, okay, that Jesus decides to do after choosing the 12 apostles. He comes down to this level place, okay, and he starts teaching to a lot of people. Okay, of course, before he was teaching, actually he was healing. He was doing all sorts of miracles, healing everybody. But because there was a lot of people at that time, okay, I think Jesus saw a very good opportunity at the time, and he taught. Okay, and he gave all these teachings, okay, in line with what we have been talking about in chapter 5, okay, which is Jesus came to teach us a new way of doing things, to teach the Jews of that day a new way of doing things. And this new way is very contradictory, very sangat berlainan compared to the old Jewish ways, okay, which is very legalistic, very follow the law, and things like that. And that's what we call the Sermon on the Plain. Okay, so what we're going to do is, why, hello, Tristan. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to read the Sermon on the Plain again. Okay, we're going to read the Sermon on the Plain again, and we are going to listen to the different parts from different people. Okay, so reading from the Sermon on the Plain. Okay, so let's open to our text. Or if you don't have your text, you can always look at my wonderful text. Okay, we're going to read from verse 17, okay, just to give you a background, all the way until verse 49. Okay, verse 17 to verse 49. And since there are, how many of us? There are 9 of us, okay, I'm going to ask everybody to read. 49 minus 17 is 35. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to read 5 verses each. 4 verses each. 4 times 17. Okay, yeah. So 49, 36, sorry. 49 minus 17, 32. Okay, fine. 4 verses each. Okay, I will be the last. So once everybody has read 4 verses, if there's any more for me to read, then I will read. Okay, so shall we go according to alphabetical order? I think if you look at the list of participants there, you can see that your names are actually arranged in alphabetical order. Do you guys see that? I'm sorry, I'm just wondering whether you guys can see that. Can? Okay, so Anna is first, and then Christina, and then Jericho, Nigel, Noel, Jasmine. Jasmine is J, but okay, she calls herself Princess Jasmine, so she became P, and then Sprenza, and then Tristan is last. And then Lim. Is that okay with you all? Okay. So we're going to read 4 verses each, starting from Anna. So Anna, and whenever you're ready, you can, from verse 17, okay, you can unmute yourself and you can start reading those 4 verses.
And from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits, and they were healed. And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed them all. Then he lifted up his eyes toward his disciples and said, "Blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God."
Thank you. Christina? Oh, sorry. I'll unmute everybody one by one. All right, Christina, you're on the.
Okay. Happy are you who are hungry, now you will be filled. Happy are you who weeps, now you will laugh. Happy are you when people hate you, reject you, insult you, and say that you are evil, all because of the Son of Man. Be glad when that happens, and dance for joy, because a great reward is kept for you in heaven. For the ancestors did the very same things to the prophets. But how terrible for you who are rich now, you have had the easy life.
Thank you. Jericho, you're on next.
But how terrible for you who are rich now, you have had your easy life. How terrible for you who are full now, you will go hungry. How terrible for you who laugh now, you will mourn and weep. How terrible. Very same thing about the false prophets. But I tell you who hear me, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you.
All right, thank you. Verse 29, Nigel onwards.
Okay. If anyone hits you on one cheek, let him hit the other one too. If someone takes your coat, let him have your shirt as well. Give to everyone who asks you for something, and when someone takes what is yours, do not ask for it back. Do for others just what you want them to do for you. If you love only the people who love you, why should you receive a blessing? Even sinners love those who love them.
Thank you. Noel?
And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those who from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore, be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful.
All right, thank you. Jasmine, you're on next.
Do not judge others, and God will not judge you. Do not condemn others, and God will not condemn you. Forgive others, and God will forgive you. Give to others, and God will give to you. Indeed, you will receive a full measure, a generous helping, poured into your hands, all that you can hold. The measure you use for others is the one that God will use for you. And Jesus told them this parable. One blind man cannot lead another one. If he does, both will fall into a ditch. No pupil is greater than his teacher, but every pupil, when he has completed his training, will be like his teacher.
Oh, thank you. Spencer.
Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but pay no attention to the log in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Please, brother, let me take that speck out of your eye," yet cannot even see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. A healthy tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a poor tree bear good fruit. Every tree is known by the fruit it bears. You do not pick figs from thorn bushes, or gather grapes from bramble bushes.
Thank you. Tristan?
Hello.
Hi, Tristan. 4 verses.
Wait. So I
45.
read finish now.
Yeah, you
Or
might.
what?
Yeah, you might as well read finish lah.
Okay. Wait, where did it end? 44, right?
Yeah.
Every tree is known by the fruit it bears. You do not pick figs from thorn bushes or gather grapes from bramble bushes. A good person brings good out of the treasure of good things in his heart. A bad person brings bad out of his treasures of bad things. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. What do you call me, Lord, Lord, and yet don't do what I tell you? Anyone who comes to me and listens to my word and obeys them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man who, in building his house, dug deep and laid the foundation on rock. The, the river flooded over and hit that house but could not shake it because it was well built. But anyone who hears my word and does not obey them is like a man who built his house without laying a foundation. When the flood hit that house, it fell at once, and what a terrible crash that was.
All right. Thank thank you. So, welcome to Eugene. Okay, Eugene just joined.
What's up, sir?
Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. So we find now once again that, oh, sorry, we are here. Oh, yes. Okay, so this was what we did. Okay, this was what I broke everybody into these main 4 sections. Okay, and when I split everybody into their breakout rooms, I gave everybody a point lah. Okay, so the first part of the Sermon on the Plain, okay, talks about faithful and unfaithful disciples. What are the key characteristics of people who are faithful and unfaithful? And then and this one I'm going to cover because the previous class there were not that many people, so I'm covering this section. And then after that, Jesus talks about how to deal with enemies. Okay, enemies not necessarily people who hate you, but also people who don't believe in the same things as we do. Okay, so I believe this section is going to be handled by Nigel and Jericho. Okay, that presents this part. And then the next part, Jesus talks about correcting others. Okay, and this section is going to be talked about by Tristan and Eugene. Okay, I hope that Tristan and Eugene are ready lah. Okay, and then the final part, Jesus comes back, okay, to the first point that he was making about the faithful and unfaithful disciples. So he starts with these two. He starts with making a comparison between how a faithful and unfaithful disciple is, and then he ends it in the same way, okay, in the same light, but with different stories altogether lah. Okay, so we are going to look at this. I'm going to show you the slides one by one as they come. Okay, you can copy them down while listening. Okay, but it's good for us to have this outline. Okay, this outline in this manner so that when we look at the Sermon on the Mount, okay, it becomes something that's easy for us to remember. And remember that the key verse, okay, the key verse in the Sermon on the Plain, Sermon on the Plain, okay, is verse 36. Okay, be merciful just as God is merciful towards you. Okay, that for us is the key verse in the Sermon on the Plain. Okay, so I'm going to start with verse 20 and verse 26. Okay, Jesus starts off the sermon by giving us characteristics about faithful and unfaithful disciples. Okay, and in here we find that there are 4 blessings and there are 4 woes. Okay, I'm not sure. In my version over here, it says blessings. Is in your book is happy are you yada yada, is it? Verse 20, verse 23. Okay, happy are you who are this, happy are you that. Okay, but in the version that I'm reading now, it's blessed lah. Okay, blessed are you who are this one. Okay, diberkatilah engkau yang yada yada yada. So 4 blessings and 4 woes. Okay, these are the characteristics. So the blessings are given to the faithful disciples. Okay, and the woes are given to the unfaithful disciples. So we look at the characteristics of the 4 blessings and the 4 woes according to this one. Okay, so we find that the 4 characteristics are the poor, the people who are hungry, okay, the people who are weeping, and the people who hate you. Okay, happy are you who are poor, happy are you who are hungry, happy are you who are weeping now, okay, and happy are you when men hate you. Okay, these are the 4 things that Jesus considers. Okay, these are the marks of a faithful disciple. Okay, poor doesn't necessarily mean that you're poor in just monetary. Okay, but basically poor in spirit. Okay, to show that somebody who is poor, okay, has a need for something. Okay, let's say if I'm poor in money, means I need money. But when we talk about this poor, Jesus is not referring to just physical poorness, but he's actually referring to poor in spirit. Okay, because the opposite of that, if you look at the 4 woes, okay, woe to you who are rich. Okay, opposite of poor is rich. Opposite of hungry is full. Okay, opposite of those who are weeping is those who laugh. Okay, opposite of those who are men who hate you is when men speak well of you. So total opposite. Okay, poor against rich, hungry against full, weeping against laughing, hate you against like you. Okay. So Jesus' point is this okay, in all these 4 blessed things, there is a dependence on God. Okay, faithful disciples are disciples who realize that they need to depend on God. They cannot be dependent on their own self. If you look at the four woes, woe to you who are rich, who are full, who laugh now, these are people who are satisfied, and they feel that they don't need God. Okay, so the main lesson for me, the main lesson behind these four happy and four woes is to realize that faithful disciples are disciples who realize that they need God. Okay? In spite of everything, okay, they need God. They may be happy, they may be, they may be monetarily rich, okay, but somebody who is faithful is somebody who realizes that they need God. And that's why people who realize they need God, look at what Jesus says. Yours is the kingdom of God. Okay, you shall be filled. Okay, you shall laugh. Okay, and indeed your reward is great in heaven. Okay, for in like manner their fathers did to them. For indeed your reward is great in heaven. Okay, we're not saying, I'm not saying that, okay, after this, everything that you have in your house, go and sell, okay, become poor. Okay, it doesn't mean that, no. Somebody can still be poor monetarily, but still have no need, still feel like that, I don't need God. Okay, in that sense, he's still under that rich category. Okay, so faithful disciples are disciples who realize that they need God. They have a dependence on God. As opposed to those who are unfaithful, the rich, the fool, the this one, okay, basically it's saying that these are people who, say, I don't need God. I'm fine on my own. Okay? So there's no need for God in their life. These people, Jesus said, you are, woe. I'm not sure. In the text, does it say woe? What does it say? Mine says woe. What does it say? Instead of happy, what does the Bible, what does the text, the blue book say? Sad? No. Check says, terrible. Terrible ka? Well, I guess it's terrible. So, it's a terrible life. Okay, to live a life without God, without a need for God, okay, it's a terrible life. Okay, so that is for me, okay, the main lesson behind the four happies and the four woes. Okay, so the first section on the Sermon on the Plain starts with this: the four blessings or the four happies and the four woes or the four terribles. Okay, the main lesson behind this is that man needs to depend on God. Okay, faithful disciples are people who realize that they need to depend on God. Okay, they need God in their lives. Okay, you cannot say I don't need God. Okay, because those are people who have woes. All right, the second part is going to be taken. I'm going to leave this to Nigel and Jericho. Okay, so these are the points that I gave them. Okay, I'm saying in dealing with enemies, there are two sets of four sayings. There's a key principle. So they're going to talk about every single point here, and then they're going to share the main lesson that they have gathered in the group discussion that day, pair discussion, sorry, not group discussion. Okay, so over to you, Nigel and Jericho.
Oh, kita first. Oh, okay. Jericho, mana kau?
Oh ya. Satu lagi.
Kau dulu.
Oh ya,
Baru saya.
saya dulu. Oh ya. Oh, so there are two sets of four sayings on loving enemies, yang from verse 27 to verse 30. The first set is from verse 27 to 28, and it talks about loving your enemies. Ya, itu aja. And in the second set, from verse 29 to 30, it talks about not to take revenge. In verse 29, dia ada bilang pasal if anyone hits you on one cheek, let him hit the other one too. And this is not talking about physical abuse. Dia sebenarnya cakap pasal insult. Because in Jewish culture, striking someone's cheek is a severe insult. So Jesus is saying that if someone insults you, don't reply back. Yeah. Okay, Nigel.
Okay. Okay. So the second is a key principle. Dia ada satu saja. That means you can see in verse 61, it says, do for others just what you want them to do for you. So it really means it's just that it's like they do for you, and then you do, they ask you to do for them, but at the same time you can also ask them to do for yourself lah. So like one and one punya punya apa itu situation, you help, orang minta tolong, kau pun minta tolong balik, like that. That's the key principle. So yeah.
Okay, so to some provocative question in verse 32 to 34, and verse 32 to 34 is talking about worldly love. Worldly love is when we only love someone who loves us and do good only to those who do good to us. So that is worldly love. Nigel.
Oh, okay. Lepas tu the fourth one is an ex and an advice. So don't hate your enemies, but love your enemies. And when you do good, do not expect something in back, because for what this saying says lah, when you do something good, you get something back 100 times, 100 more. So that's the advice that Jesus gave. And the last one is the result of obedience. Verse 36, it says, be merciful. That's all. And then the last one is the main lesson in this sermon, yang love your enemy. The main lesson is, I just give one only lah, just one. The main lesson is be kind to others.
Okay.
Amen.
Thank you. All right. I think that's a very good. It's a very good dissection of this section. Actually, this is a very difficult section if you think about it now. And if you think about it, okay, this section is actually probably a very difficult section for many people. Okay, and Jesus actually purposely asked the provocative questions. You know, because remember that Jesus is trying to teach everybody a new way of doing things, a new way of looking at things, a new way of living your life. You know, and one of the new ways is you should be different than the rest. You know, everybody is always good to people who are good to them. But what about people who are bad to you? You know, I think in our life we know, okay, we cannot escape when we cannot escape the fact that there are people that are not going to like us. Okay, and I think the older you get now, I feel so old now. The older you get you know, there are going to be people that are just out there and waiting for you to fall. Okay, waiting for you to make a mistake. Okay, so what do you do with people like that? You know, what do you do with people who are just out there to hurt you? You know, people who are just out there and they just don't want, you know, to have anything nice to do with you. Everything that they feel about you is bad for some reason or another. It could have been your fault. It could have been just their fault. Okay, but what do you do with those kind of people? Okay, and I like when Jericho was saying that this slapping each other in the cheek is more than just a physical abuse. Okay, it's actually more of, you know, an insult. You know what, if somebody that you don't like or somebody that doesn't like you, you know, starts insulting you. Okay, so how do we deal with them? And the key thing that Jesus is telling us is that don't do what is the norm. The norm is to, you know, hit back, strike back. You know, the norm is but the new norm, the new thing that Jesus is telling us, which is difficult. Okay, I'm not denying that it is difficult. Okay, it is hard and it requires a lot of, you know, godly power. Okay, and the thing that we should do is to love them back, because that is what separates us from people who do not know God. Okay, that is what separates us, you know, from the Jesus says as the evil people. Okay, how we deal with people who are bad towards us is a very key, important thing about our own character and our own belief as Christians. Okay, so the key principle, as said in verse 31, I think it was very nicely said. And then remember that verse 36 is the center of it all. In the whole Sermon on the Plain, okay, verse 36 sums the whole thing up. Be merciful, just as God is merciful towards you. I'm reminded of a verse in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. It's one of my favorite verses in Romans. Okay, but God shows his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I think that's a very beautiful portrayal of what love really is. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Okay? And that's why when we read at verse 36, be merciful just as God is merciful towards you. We also need to remember that our relationship with God, okay, started with God loving us first. Okay, not we love God, but God loves us. No, God loves us okay, while we were still sinners. And because of that, we are asked to do the same. And that is what separates us okay, from non-Christians, people who don't believe in the Lord. All right. Thank you very much to Nigel and the gang. Now is the group that we want to talk about, which is the judging group. Okay, Eugene and Tristan. Okay, Eugene and Tristan are going to be talking about verse 37 to verse 42. So these are the points. Okay, this is the summary of the sermon in verse 37 and 42. So Tristan and Eugene, over to you.
Yeah, it's just Eugene.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. So right, the first one is what did you? Oh, correct. The first one was correcting others, but the first point Sir gave. Okay, so there's a few sayings lah. Throughout 37 to 38. Yeah. So first one is do not judge others, blah blah blah, until do not judge others and God will not judge you. Yeah. Yes. And then the other one is do not condemn others and God will not condemn you. And then forgive and God will forgive you, right? Yeah. Remember to forgive other people, guys. Okay, and then give to others and God will give to you. I think this is the third one, right? Yes. No, the fourth one. Yes. Okay, then the next one is the key principle. The key principle is the measure you use for others, God will use for you. Okay? Thanks. Then okay, and then the next one is the provocation questions lah. Provocation questions Jesus asked. Jesus very big brain one, you know. So he asked this. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but pay no attention to the
To the law.
yeah, to the log in your eye? Question mark. Yeah, it's too, it's very deep, according to the book, right? Speck and log, Jesus used a hyperbole, which is a figure of speech, to emphasize and to sharpen the contrast of how foolish and hypocritical it is for us to criticize someone for a minor fault while we remain blind to our own, which is bigger. Yeah, this happens a lot lah, during, like, even now, Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then And an advice Jesus gave, right, was first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to the speck out of your brother's eye. So this one lah, it means like you need to be better first ba. Be better first. Only you can not judge others lah, but maybe help them and all. So the result, right? Not result lah. The lesson I've learned through this thing, the result of obedience is verse 42 lah. Yeah, that one whole thing is quite long. So what I don't know about Tristan lah, but what I've learned throughout this few verses, right? It's like don't judge other people, but like if you judge other people, right, you yourself might be judged also, because you also have flaws, Yes. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, Tristan, anything to add?
No, he said too good now.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Tristan, and thank you, Eugene, and also thank you to Tristan. Okay, so this part is also an equally difficult part, lah. If you think that loving your enemies is difficult, okay, I think an equally difficult thing is how we deal with others, okay, how we look at others, lah. Okay, and this idea of judging others is something that is very common to all of us. Okay, I don't think there's anybody here that has not judged anybody else. Okay, every one of us have fallen for this before. We look at somebody and like, bidaknya dia punya rambutnya dia baru gunting. Contoh. Okay, so
Spencer.
Contoh. Okay, so but the thing is, Jesus reminds us that when we judge others, okay, the way we judge others is also the same way that others judge us. Okay, so, and he gives this very, very extreme example. Okay, why do you look, why do you find fault with a speck? A speck is something that is, like dust quality, like this small thing in your brother's eye. Tapi sendiri punya mata, okay, there's this plank that is coming out of your own eye, so you don't see. Okay, your own faults, your own faults you don't see. But you want to go and correct other people's small, tiny faults, that is in comparison with yours, is really inconsequential. Okay, so Jesus reminds us that another way of looking at things is to remember not to judge others, just like what Eugene said. Okay, and we find that once again, okay, Jesus, says this one, then these three sections at the end here. Okay, Jesus still does that. He asks some provocative questions, he gives an exhortation, advice, and then he reminds us of the result of obedience. Okay, so we find that even in the 4 parts in the Sermon on the Plain, okay, there's this certain consistency. Okay, Jesus says a few things, he asks a few provocative questions to get us to think, he gives us the advice, and then he tells us what is the result. If you obey what I say, what will the result be? Okay, so that's this part about judging others. Right? I just want to mention here that Jesus warns us of a few things. Okay, we should be careful of whom we follow. If we put our trust in the wrong teachers, we would end up in trouble. Okay, like a blind man leading another blind man, and then both falling into a ditch. This is a very famous English saying. Okay, the blind leading the blind. Okay, so the blind people cannot hope to act as a guide to others unless they first see clearly where they are going. Okay, otherwise they will lead others to disaster. Okay, we should learn to be more like the teacher, okay, which is Jesus. Okay, now this last part, okay, I'm going to combine these two, the tree and its fruit, the 2 house builders. Okay, actually the 2 house builders is a parable in this section, but we're going to group this together, okay, to see the last part on the Sermon on the Plain, okay, which talks about the faithful and the unfaithful disciple. So this part is going to be handled by Noel. Okay, so over to you, Noel.
Everyone can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
self-conscious with
very good.
this speaker. For my section, I might ask some questions for you guys, so you can also unmute if you want to answer. But I want to start with the two kinds of people for the tree and its fruit. So if you look in the verse for the tree and its fruit, verse 43 to 45, Jesus is already very straightforward. He gave an example, and he directly already says the lesson, which I'll later clarify. So there are two kinds of people, and these two kinds of people already stated in here is a good person and a bad person. So how did Jesus represent the people represent these two people, a healthy tree and a poor tree? And he said something very clearly, okay, in verse 43. Okay, I'm not quite sure what is your version, but it says, a healthy tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a poor tree bear good fruit. So if we rephrase the sentence, it becomes healthy tree brings good fruit, poor tree brings bad fruit. And I want you to know that fruit here is actually saying the things that we store in our hearts. So if we rephrase the whole thing, a good person brings good things and a bad person brings bad things. And the lesson here that Jesus wants us to keep us reminding ourselves is every word and action, which are the things we do, is a reflection of our character at heart. So we should only put what is good and right into our hearts, which is if you think about it, is kind of true. Because if a bad person were to do bad things, he would need to have like bad intentions, right? And if a person who really wants to do kind things to other people, he must have the right intention to do so. And this is the lesson for the faithful and unfaithful servant. So the two kinds of people, as stated here, is a good person and a bad person. Okay. Now, to the two house builders. So in this parable, there are two kinds of builders. Okay, so if you read your verse, you'll see two kinds of builders. One, and Jesus says this, anyone who comes to me and listens to my word and obeys them, I will show you what he is like. So he's trying to describe what this person is like. So we have two kinds. The first kind is a person who builds his house on a foundation. The second is a person who builds his house without a foundation. And so let me just talk about it. So the person who builds his house on a foundation is a person who listens to my word and obeys them. And the person who builds his house without a foundation is a person who hears my word and does not obey them. So before I go any further, can I ask everyone here, what do you think foundation here means? Any answers, anyone? What do you think foundation here represents?
If you want to answer, you can
Anohan?
unmute yourself. Sorry, people, if you want to answer, you can unmute yourself. I've already said it. You can unmute yourself anytime.
Maybe Tristan, Eugene, you have something to say? No?
Bro, why me? Oh?
I don't know.
Yes.
But, okay. But
Yes.
What?
I
I
don't
don't know.
you.
Faith?
Faith. Okay, that's a
Exactly,
good one.
faith.
Anyone else? Also
Faith.
faith. Okay,
Faith.
faith.
Yeah, faith.
Okay, good. So let me continue. First. So I'm not quite sure your version, but for mine, if you look closely at verse 47 and verse 49, you see there's a very obvious difference. A man who listens to my words and obeys them. And then in verse 49, a man who hears my words and does not obey them. In Hebrew, the word listen is not just a physical thing, because in Hebrew it's called the Shema, and the Shema has three components. The first is to hear, the physical action of hearing something, to obey, to obey to obey something, and to act upon it. So what Jesus is trying to tell us is that if we were to hear, obey, and act to his words, we will be like the person who built his house on a foundation. And if we were the people who only hears the physical, they just hear and does not obey them, they are like a person who builds their house without a foundation. So the main lesson here that I want to point out is that just as the result here, the person who built his house on the foundation on a rock, when the flood came in, nothing happens to the house. And then the person who did not build his foundation, the house crashed down. And then it says, what a terrible crash that was. So the lesson that I want to give everyone is, we should learn to shema to God's word so that our faith can stand on God's love and wisdom like a firm foundation on the rock, standing strong against the flood of daily struggles in life. And yes, that is what I have to say. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I think it's a very good summary of this section. Okay, the two kinds of people. I noticed that I noticed that Noel used the word good and bad. And interestingly enough, this also challenges us on our understanding of good and bad people. Okay, we find that Jesus tells us that good people have good fruit coming out of them and bad people have bad fruit coming out of them. And this is also another mark of a faithful and unfaithful disciple. Okay, maybe to the world, this person may be looked at as a good person. He does good things, he does kind things, he gives to charity. But because he's unfaithful to God, he's bad fruit. He or she, okay, is bad fruit. And another way of distinguishing between the faithful and unfaithful disciples, as Noel said, is to see what kind of foundation they have in their life. Okay, and I actually like this parable a lot. I'm just going to share this screen again. I actually like this parable a lot, this last one. Okay, notice that the man who built the house, okay, the man who built the house without a foundation. Okay, if you know this old Sunday school song, it says that he built this house on the sand. Now, okay, we don't really know whether it's a sand, but there's no foundation. Okay, against which the stream. Oh, sorry, this is a different version. I should be looking at the Good News version. I'm so sorry. No wonder I felt like it's so strange and. Okay, so the man. Sorry, Okay, anyone who hears does not obey them is like a man who built his house without laying a foundation. When the flood hit that house, it fell at once. Okay, it's not like pieces and pieces fall away. If you've ever been stuck in a flood before, you know that actually when the flood comes, right, the house doesn't really like one shot go. Okay, it's usually bit by bit. The waters will hit it bit by bit, But now Jesus' view of this is somebody without any foundation. The moment the flood comes, the whole house crashes in. Okay, and what a terrible crash that was. Okay, it means for all the nice things that you build, if there's no foundation at the bottom, right? Okay, one flood comes, that's it. Okay, the whole house just crashes down. It's not like bit by bit erodes away. Okay, it's not. One whole bit just crashes down like that. Okay, so to conclude this section, okay, I want to point out once again, okay, on this one lah. Okay, so this is how the Sermon on the Plain will look like. Okay, it starts with the faithful and unfaithful disciples, the 4 blessings and the 4 woes. Okay, goes and ends with also the key characteristics of a faithful and unfaithful disciple, the kind of people, the kind of builders, and then in the middle, okay, on the other 2 ends, okay, are practical ways on how to be faithful disciples. Okay, in terms of how we deal with enemies, and also in terms of how we judge and correct others. Okay, but the center of it all, the key verse to the Sermon on the Plain is found in verse 36, which is, be merciful, okay, just as God is merciful towards you. Okay, and that, in summary, is the Sermon on the Plain. Okay. All right, any questions so far? We still have one more section to go, but I just want to ask if anybody has any more questions. Any questions? Okay, right. If there's no questions, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the next chapter. Okay, but I only want to look at the first part in the next chapter, because the next chapter, chapter 7, starts with a miracle. Okay, and I like miracles because miracles are always a good way for us to compare. Okay, so we're going to read now. We're going to read from Luke chapter 7. Okay, if you can open to your text now, we're going to read from Luke chapter 7, verses 1 to 10, and then we're going to read from Luke chapter 8. Okay, verses 40 to 42. Okay, and then we're going to skip this section after a while, and then after that, we're going to read from verse 48 all the way to 53. Or actually, no, 49 to 53. 56, 56, yeah, 56. Okay, so we're gonna spend this next part of the lesson to compare these 2 miracles. Okay, the first miracle in Luke chapter 7 is Jesus heals a Roman officer's servant, and then the second one is Jesus heals Jairus' daughter. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna read. Sorry, I'm going to stop this recording so that I can make another part to this.